This is a Film Stories original podcast.
When it comes to weight loss, no two people are the same. That's why Noom builds personalized plans based on your unique psychology and biology. Take Brittany. After years of unsustainable diets, Noom helped her lose 20 pounds and keep it off.
I was definitely in a yo-yo cycle for years of just losing weight, gaining weight, and it was exhausting.
And Stephanie. She's a former D1 athlete who knew she couldn't out-train her diet, and she lost 38 pounds.
My relationship to food before Noom was never consistent.
And Evan, he can't stand salads, but he still lost 50 pounds with Noom.
I never really was a salad guy. That's just not who I am. Even through the pickiness, Noom taught me that building better habits builds a healthier lifestyle. I'm not doing this to get to a number. I'm doing this to feel better.
Get your personalized plan today at Noom.com. Real Noom users compensated to provide their story. In 4 weeks, the typical Noom user can expect to lose 1 to 2 pounds per week. Individual results may vary.
We made this.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the X-Cast. The truth is in here. My name is Kurt North and welcome to our special coverage of the X-Files. And this week we are going to be interviewing a very special person, and that special person is Mr. Pat Skipper, who starred in the X-Files for 4 episodes, 5 if you count Memento Mori, as Bill Scully Jr. Pat, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. It's been great to be able to speak to you today, and it's wonderful to have somebody in the Scully family as such to be able to talk to. Before we get into some of the X-Files stuff, I just wanted to first of all say that I managed to have the privilege of reading your book recently, and I found it a really fascinating read. And even though it is aimed at actors, I think it's really interesting that the mindset and the kind of coaching techniques that you use in that book. Since writing that, has anything changed for you? Would you like to go back? Do you use it as a reference point, or do you point people in that direction for any young budding actors that come along at all?
I do. I point them towards it. I think there are a lot of useful things in it. I've spent a lot more time coaching since then.
Yeah.
And I find in dealing with people face to face, I push people, but I'm considerably gentler than I am in the book at times in terms of urging people to work harder and to focus more. No, I stand behind the book though. I think it holds up.
Yeah, it's quite forthright. I mean, what I particularly liked about it, the main takeaway for me with the book is this idea of the art and the athlete. I mean, for me, just from my perspective, that when I was reading that, I've had a couple of friends who were a couple of years below me and ended up playing football or soccer, as it is in the UK. One of which was one of the best players I've ever played against. His footwork was absolutely amazingly incredible. And the other was nicknamed 110%. And the guy who got 110% and was just so dedicated to his craft actually was a hair's inch away from being called up to the international side for England. And I just, when I was reading your book, I just found it fascinating that you look at actors from that perspective of, the hard work that goes into acting and the coaching aspects of how you kind of do that and coach that kind of mentality. I think mentality is something that comes in the book quite often.
Yeah.
Did that come to you originally when you were started acting? Was that something that came to you naturally, or is that something that you've actually learned over the time as well?
It was learned because I was in school. I studied acting. I went to university, and then I ended up at the Yale Drama School, which is a well-known and highly respected drama school. And teachers would say things like, "Well, you need to get out of your head." It's like, yes, I'm a young student. Yes, I really want to get out of my head. And then I would wait for the second part. And no one would say anything like, how do you do that? right?
Yeah.
How do you get out of your head, right? How do you, and the answer, of course, is, well, you need to get into your body. And to get into your body requires an athletic approach, right?
Right.
So that our inner critic gets in the way of our athletic ability, can be silenced for long enough so that we can achieve up to the level that we're capable of that day. So I've worked really hard in my studio. I still train actors, and I work at it, a couple times a week. And I've learned to speak less and have people do more.
Yeah.
Right. And so acting is doing, right. And so there's only two ways to get better, and that's to have a reliable process and to have many, many repetitions. And like your friend, the football player, he took more repetitions than most guys.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, exactly.
And he got it in. He honed his instincts and built his athletic ability, and probably in that area began to think less and do more, do better. Right. So that's how I approach acting.
Okay. And what made you actually decide to become an actor in the first place? How did that spark light in you?
Well, I mean, listen, it's not a very interesting story, I don't expect. I mean, like most actors, I think when I was a kid, I liked watching television. And one day I thought, there are kids in this. Maybe I could do this too,
Yeah.
And, and then, so, you do the school play, and then you go off to university, and the competition's slightly better, and they still give you parts. So you think, well, maybe I could do more of this. And eventually, I found myself competing against very highly trained and very, very talented people, and sometimes succeeding, enough to have a career.
Yeah.
And so that's how it goes. Pretty much. Once
you've done your Yale things, I know that in the book you mention about the kind of productions that you put on as well.
Yeah.
The theatre stuff and things like that we do. We could talk about that probably for hours if we wanted to. But in your history of acting, what do you prefer to actually do the most? Is it the TV shows? Is it the movies? Is it the theatre? Or dare I say, is it the commercials? What is your favourite kind of acting to do?
Yeah, I'm not very good at getting commercials. I'm not very funny right out of the box. So I don't tend to do very well in that arena. I grew up in the theatre. It's a great training ground. I don't really work on stage anymore because I don't really have the time. Because every time I get cast in something, then I end up getting offered something that pays better. So I kind of stopped doing it. I really enjoy working in television because it's more of an actor's medium than the film business. The director, it has, the image is king, right?
Yeah.
And in a large movie, they can blow things up and fill the screen with all kinds of effects and whatnot. But in television, really, they can't afford to do it. So then you have human beings actually speaking to one another for extended periods of time. And so it really can be a great proving ground for actors. So I've enjoyed working on television. I've done quite a lot. I did a couple movies this year, and it was fun. So I enjoyed that too. And I worked with some very top name directors this year. I was in Oppenheimer, and then I was also in Babylon, which is Damien Chazelle directed that.
Was that Oppenheimer, the Christopher Nolan?
Christopher Nolan, yeah. And Cillian Murphy is the lead.
Yeah.
And so I worked with Cillian Murphy, and I worked with Gary Oldman and Matt Damon, and I have a little part, but it was fascinating, really. And Cillian is a wonderful guy. I got to spend a couple of days with him, and I enjoyed his company very much. And Gary is, he's Gary Oldman. Gary fucking Oldman.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I'm a huge Christopher Nolan fan, and I know that the some of the people on the network, actually, with ourselves on the podcast network that we are actually on, and the person who made this podcast is a huge Nolan fan as well. So that'll be great for us when we're watching it in the movie theater, just waiting to see you on screen. That'll be a nice little nugget for us.
Well, I'll be there for milliseconds. He's a fascinating guy. There are very, very few people on the set. He really sort of makes a very, very tiny circle.
Right.
And unusual. And he is right there. He's not like looking in some monitor. He's like right looking at you while you do your stuff,
Yeah.
And very, very engaged. And it was very interesting. I mean, he was very nice to me, but I enjoyed because he was working with Cillian quite extensively.
Mm.
And it was fascinating to watch. I mean, because both of them are at the top of their game, and to watch them collaborate and to play a small part in that was very engaging.
Yeah, I mean, seeing like Cillian in the likes of Inception and things, it is a joy to watch, and obviously his Peaky Blinders stuff that is really good as well. But
terrific stuff.
I mean, as I say with Christopher Nolan, it's amazing to me that just how much he can get on screen and using the practical effects and things, as well as the some of the behind the scenes, like you mentioned. You do see that in some of the behind the scenes about how active he is on the set, and
very, very engaged. Yeah,
that's fascinating. That's something I wasn't expecting today. So that's given me a bit of joy to my life. So that brings me actually to one of my questions. So with regards to directing, because I was going to mention about the likes of Rob Bowman and Bob Goodwin and Kim Manners as well, who were obviously part of the show when you were there on the X-Files. But how do you personally like to be directed? Before we talk about those directors in such, what ways have you found that you like to be directed from a director, and how have they changed over either the years and per director?
Optimally in television, because it's very fast moving, a professional actor should require very little direction. Particularly if you're someone like me, who, you show up for a week or 10 days or 2 episodes or, a day or for however long. My job is to make it easy on everybody and to be prepared and to do the thing that I do and do it well. Mm. The best directors are the ones who create, in my view, a safe environment for collaboration with your fellow players.
Yeah.
I've had very, very good luck over the years with directors. And there was some I've had, close relationships when I was up in Vancouver. It was a very long time ago, but, Rob and I played golf a couple of times, as I recall, but they were all lovely. Bob was married to my mother on the show, right?
Yeah, Sheila Larkin, yeah.
Yes. And so he was very paternal towards me in a way. And I think he directed the first episode that I was in. I mean, Memento Mori, I think, and that was the one that I got cut out of. Yeah, they were all terrific. And, and David and Jillian, as the stars of a TV show, set the tone.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
In terms of the professionalism. Sometimes it can be messy. Other times you go on and you're like, oh, these people are serious. We're going to do this now. Let's get together, work together, see what happens. In the first little rehearsal, and they were quite welcoming, and so the entire experience was terrific. And I think mainly it was for me, from my perspective, was guided by their friendliness and their professionalism, really.
Going to actually how you came around to taking the X-Files on. And one of the questions that I do have is that in Vancouver, a lot of things that we've said on the podcast is just how much of a great pool of talent there is in Vancouver, and the amount of actors that they have up there. I think you would have been in LA or Florida and going up there. So how did that come about? How did the initial contact come for you to go and apply for that?
They did cast quite a lot of Canadian actors in the show, obviously.
Yeah.
But there were a fair number. I think almost in every episode, there were people who flew up and worked on the show. And they had a casting office at Fox. And I went in just like any other show and had an audition for the part, it was very intense, as I recall. And I don't remember how many people were in the room or who was in the room even. And I was the last one who read for this part, at least that day. And I kind of came out of there and I was like, man, I need to sit down for a second. And I just like sat down. I had to breathe, because it was like, for whatever reason, it was emotional or something. I don't recall. And I guess it was probably the scene that from her hospital room, which was a very long and difficult scene.
Yeah.
And it required, for an audition, it required a lot of work to get it there. And so I just sat down, and about 2 seconds later, the door burst open, and he's like, "Oh, I was just going to run out and catch you." And I said, I was just sitting here. And he said, "I want you to read again and for Chris." And so they brought Chris over, and I read for him, and it went well the second time too, obviously. And then I don't know, by the time I got home, I had a job offer, and I was delighted.
Yeah, I mean, I want to break down that scene actually shortly, because there's a couple of things from an acting perspective I'd like to ask you about. But in regards to the audition itself, the X-Files at the time, talking end of season 3, beginning of season 4, it was at the height of its time. The Super Bowl, when Leonard Betts, the episode of Leonard Betts aired, it kind of was massive and one of the biggest episodes of all time for the X-Files. In your book, you talk about taking yourself out of your own self and understanding that. And you mention about you don't refer to X-Files in the book, but you mention about going into auditions and you are there to perform your skill, your athletical ability, and actually give them something that they don't even know what they're looking for. So in regards to that, obviously the X-Files being as big as it was, how do you train your people who you are coaching to actually get out of that mindset for not going in, say if they're going for a massive movie or something like that? How do you actually coach that for them to understand, to stay as level-headed as they can be, and to do the very thing that's inside them?
It's very, very difficult when you come up against something that is very popular, or a project that's potentially career-making, or something that you really, really want to get just because it's a great part. We can tend to push and try too hard and get tight and get our bodies tight, and then not be unable to do the thing that we've prepared and the thing that we're good at. And so I'm constantly, I with my students, and it's just something I had to learn over the years, is to sort of treat everything sort of the same. Every audition is the same. It doesn't matter what it is. I'm going to follow my process. I'm going to do my best. Early on in my career, I made a mistake, and I read for a pilot for a TV show, and I read this thing, and I thought, God, this thing is fucking awful. I hate it. It's a piece of shit. Fuck me, Yeah. And then it ends up being ER, and it's on for like 10 years, and everybody got rich but me. I learned from that experience, like, I'm not a good judge of material, and so I treat them all, like it's just a bunch of words, it's just a bunch of shit, and try to bring myself to it as much as I can, and commit myself not to the project, but to the life of the character that I'm inhabiting. And so how do I immerse myself in the world, right? Yeah. And so I try to push past the nerves and the desire and get to the work as fast as I can. And I teach my students that all the time,
Yeah, I think also as well, to put into perspective the Bill Scully aspect as well. So when you're preparing for that part and you're looking at reading your part, and like you've said in the book, where you talk about just reading it raw, so really kind of just stripping it back to the words that it actually says on the page, rather than instilling anything in there until you know the actual the verbatim what the words are. But then you talk about the given circumstances of the character. So what Bill Scully is to you before Chris Carter, before Rob Bowman even gets to see you.
Yes.
How did you approach that, if you remember? But how would you approach that now in working out who Bill Scully is? The questions that you ask, like the who am I and what am I there for? How did you actually bring that to life and for Bill Scully?
Generally, I'll sit down and I tend to write out a bunch of things, and I'll write who am I, and then the pen generally writes a bunch of things that I'm unprepared to see. Like I tap into my imagination.
Yeah.
What would it feel like to have a sister who I admire, the smartest one in the family, to be involved in something so ridiculous as running around looking for aliens? How would it feel? What is it like to have somebody that you care for go off the deep end? And of course, that's not the perspective of the show.
Yeah.
The perspective of the people who watch it. But from Bill Scully, it is a military man.
Yeah.
He's not highly imaginative. He's pretty bright, but he's not as bright as his sister. But on the other hand, he's a loving and caring person. He cares about his sister. He cared about his sister who passed. There's anger and in all of that. And so, I begin to tap into areas of my own experience, right?
Yeah.
I have a sister, she's been involved in things at times that I didn't agree with. I've lost people in my life. I know what loss feels like. I know what it feels like to blame somebody else for that person's loss. So once you get past this is X-Files and that beautiful person I'm acting with is, Gillian fucking Anderson, I just apply, I create a set of given circumstances through my imagination, then I apply it to my own experience. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it does. Yeah. And it also, within the kind of the acting style and coaching that you talk about, you're looking at the other person, because it isn't only just about you. And I know that you've mentioned in other interviews and things about how good Gillian is and how prepared she is and things like that.
Consummate professional, yes.
Yeah. When you come into play off somebody like that, one of the things that you mentioned in the book is about like sort of finding something within, like, say, Gillian, for example, when you're looking at the way that she acts and finding something that you love about her, something that you hate about her, maybe something that, the thing. How did that work for you? Does that work for you in, say, that Memento Mori scene where you're seeing Gillian in the way that she acts and plays off that? How do your reactions and acting skills work in that regard when you're looking for something to bounce off on Gillian, from Gillian?
Yes, I mean that part of it was actually fairly simple. I mean, first of all, she's got a beautiful soul, and I responded to her immediately, and she also looked pretty sick, in the scene, and it affected me. The thing that drives that scene, I think, is, first of all, she just welcomed me in and started playing with me, and we were playing off each other. And, I think, in some ways that scene is some of the best stuff I ever did in my whole career, in a way.
Right.
But there's a real awkwardness between us.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The way that you come in and you introduce yourself to her, it feels like you haven't seen her for a bit. There's an awkward hug. There's a lot of things like that, which I really caught on the watch of it.
Right. And so we care for each other, but we don't really particularly like each other much, and so we're trying to have a relationship. Both of us are trying, but we're not very good at it. We're both pretty awkward. And it's a relationship that I had, with my own family at times. My family's kind of physically awkward and not very huggy, and we're loving, but we're kind of stiff. That awkwardness, it is so human and so recognizable to people who have siblings that, I think that it's the thing that makes that scene special. Too bad they didn't show it.
Well, plenty of people have seen it, so it's not. You know, at least we do have the evidence on film, which is fantastic to do. Yeah, I mean, and like you say, with the scene itself, what I find fascinating, and just wanting to get your kind of feeling on and the way that you would portray this as well, is the ambivalence that's in there as well, because there's moments in that scene where you're, as you say, you're quite adversarial. There's the awkwardness of things. There's the love there that's obviously there. You both are trying. You can see that you both are trying to, you know, make as good a situation as possible as this can be.
Yeah. And
then there's a moment where you kind of give some good news, where you're talking about getting reposted to the base where Daddy Scully ended up going, and Scully mentions also, it's from a previous episode called Piper Maru, where she went back to that Air Force base. How do you, from an actor perspective, go from that awkwardness to, you know, jumping into like how you would feel by trying to give that good news at the same time, and that ambivalent kind of aspect, because it really does work in that scene.
Right. I'm trying at that moment, you know, I think before that, there's a very awkward moment just before I say that. It feels like there's a weird silence, and then I sort of jump in and say, "Oh, did you hear? You know, this happened."
Yeah.
And you know, and that's the place where we grew up. You know, we were children on the base.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's a reminder of our, you know, shared ancestry. But then it very quickly goes to, you know, we begin that, you know, there's a lot of ghosts there now. Dad is dead, and then Melissa, and then bang, you know, we're back at it, you know. So there's a very brief moment where we share our childhood, but it's interrupted by everything that happened later.
From what I've seen on that clip is, I think it's Rob Bowman that does that just directing, is that the editing, the way it's edited as well. But when you say the word Melissa, it comes directly onto your face. As part of like sort of the way that the X-Files was filmed, how many cameras would normally be on, and how many takes would that be? Was that done all in, say, like 5 or 6 takes? Was it done in a 1 take situation? And how much did you rehearse all of that?
These days it's somewhat different, you know, because everything's shot on digital video.
Yeah.
You know, in those days, you shot on film, and really they only had one camera going at a time, generally. I mean, sometimes they would shoot a master and a close-up at the same time, but it was very, very rare. And so filming was very slow in those days, and you really couldn't afford to mess it up either, because cutting, saying cut in film and resetting up and doing it all takes a tremendous amount of time. And so unlike in video, I mean, I can fuck up my line, or I can, forget it and curse, whatever.
Yeah.
And then I just go back and say, oh, Kurt, just give me the line again. And we just keep going. Right. It's very, very different than it used to be. So there was one camera. I don't expect that I had many takes. Now there are different sizes, right? Like there's probably one of me, kind of, waist up, and then a sort of a medium shot, and then there's some serious close-ups in that scene as well.
Yeah.
So you have a chance by the time you get to the the moments that are going to be in close-up you rehearse kind of on film.
Right.
You really don't get much rehearsal. I mean, you get there in the morning and you run it through. It was me and her and the director, and we ran it through once. And then he would, say, okay, good. This is good. Or stand over here or whatever and say, or give you, say, maybe you ought to think about this to work on or something. Whatever directors do in that first bit, right? Generally, they want you to be good, and generally you try to be, and they go, okay, great. And they bring in the crew. That they bring in, and you do a rehearsal for the people who are lighting the scene and the guys the men are setting up the camera. Yeah. And so you just do it. And it's a trip, man. People can, some people are really, really good at it.
And I think finally for that scene, then just quickly, that you mentioned about the ghost section, because that's when it really kind of turns a little bit darker in that, you can see where Bill is coming from and his almost blame and, almost alluding to the fact that, Scully will be judged on what has happened. There's quite a bit of like anger in that, and when you're bringing up things that you've done in your past, I know in your book you mentioned about like the aspects of your personal life, but you can also use alternative ways of doing it. And I tried some of those alternative ways of. I think I used the sentence. It was something like, "I get really frustrated when my boss micromanages me," and it's fascinating when just for the listeners here listening here, that it's feeling that where that comes from in the body. And I found that really interesting, that, when I say that I actually do feel that emotion before actually even like contemplating something in, say, the real life world. And is that something that you use a lot when you temper in some of those anger moments, or do you actually tend to lean towards more like real life situations?
Yeah, it's a really great acting technique, and I learned it from a teacher of mine. Just my happiest day was when, and say whatever it is, but the very act of saying that aloud will elicit an emotional response in your body. And so it's a wonderful acting technique. I did not know this acting technique when we shot this.
All right, okay, fair enough.
But quite frankly, I didn't really need it.
Right, yeah.
Because my responses, she was so open and so spontaneous and so good. I just went with what she did.
Right, yeah. So just bounced off that emotion from she was portraying.
Yes, and I have a sister whom I love very much. We also have a oftentimes difficult and adversarial relationship. So this is not a foreign thing to me, right?
Yeah.
And but by God, she's great in the scene. I mean, she's great in everything I've ever seen her in, pretty much. But she's terrific in that scene.
She is, yeah. She's amazing. So moving off that scene then, and thank you for going through that in depth, because it was something I was really intrigued to talk about. When you look at someone like David Duchovny is a completely different type of actor. You mentioned also in the book about David Boreanaz and the way that he kind of was a bit of a student of the work, really, when he was doing Bones, and you're seeing at the end of season 1 in Bones, where you're playing. I think you're playing the boyfriend of Bones' mother at that point. How, from like an actor's perspective of like, so someone like Gillian or someone like David Duchovny or David Boreanaz, do you change the way that you act with a reflection of what they're doing? And how would you like say that the way that David Duchovny works with regards to his acting? Because I think he's a very, very understated and brilliant at the way that he works, especially given the type of stuff that he's given with you, because it plays into David Duchovny's real strengths, and I think that for me works. But how does David Duchovny approach that, and how do you approach his way of working?
My job is to react to what I'm given, right? In the same way that Gillian was there, he was very present in those scenes.
Yeah.
And as a side note, a very welcoming acting partner. And, and he, before I worked, he said, "Oh my gosh, I heard so many great things about the scenes that you did." And, and he was just very, very nice to me, and so that lets my guard down a little bit. And so we could play. There is not only one, sort of method to act.
Yeah.
People have different approaches. David is very, very skillful. And he makes it look so easy that people don't understand what he's up to.
Yeah.
But when I see the scenes, he's very alive.
Yeah.
Right. And and that's why, in many ways, he's very serious, by the way. I mean, he doesn't show up and not know his words or like have a point of view on what he's doing. He approaches it, I think. I mean, I only worked with him a couple of times, but he approaches it a slightly different way. But I mean, Cillian Murphy approaches it kind of the same way, from what I can see, that David does.
Right.
They have an ease about themselves, and they're alive and relaxed in their bodies. They're fearless and confident. It's hard to come by, you know. And he's David's very good athlete. He just makes it look so goddamn easy. It makes you mad, really. But it's kind of hard work, you know, for most.
Yeah, I mean, your scenes together with him. What I find fascinating, I know you've talked about the male kind of competition aspect to acting, and that generally is the way that it works. I see the conversations that you have really interesting, because a lot of people, and I think you've alluded to this in the past, where you say that you weren't just aware of just how hated or despised Bill Scully was at the time, but then later came to find out how people don't particularly like him. But I think a lot of that is to do with the way that it's the reaction of Mulder more than it is, because Mulder comes up as, especially in the scenes that you have, the son of the bitch one, for example. That's what I mean by the understatedness of, like, you're feeling quite empathy from Mulder, but you've got this other alpha male, like, almost throwing punches at him constantly, and he's accepting those punches, and I think that is a great dynamic for you both to have, in the way that's played, because it could be like a loggerheads thing and two alpha males together, but it isn't. It's really nuanced. Is that something that came across when you were playing against him?
Yeah, you know, it's a subtle power scene.
Yeah,
you know, we're two men struggling for the same woman. You know, of course, our perspectives are different. You know, because I'm the brother and he's lover, whatever he is, partner. You know, they're joined in a sort of a deeply spiritual way that which drives the whole show. Obviously, I was kind of surprised. I remember the first time we shot that scene, he surprised me, and I thought, oh God, well, of course that's how he does it. Of course, you know. Because I thought he might be fighting with me. I didn't know what was going to come, you know?
Yeah.
I just walked into the thing but he and I had established a bit of a relationship, just chatting, you know, before, and we were at ease with each other. And I think, you know, he sort of had permission at that point to feel whatever it was he was feeling. And where he got his feelings, I don't know, but, you know, I mean, you know, Scully is essentially dying, you know, and it has put him in it. You know, he's feeling very sick and guilty and afraid, and other things you'd have to ask him.
Yeah,
but that scene played very, very easily, you know. And it's funny though, as you mentioned, you know, people don't particularly like Bill Scully, and it actually surprised me, because I thought my point of view in these things was so very clear. And so I was obviously so immersed in my own part that I never thought to even think about how are people going to respond to this, because I don't really care very much how people respond to it. But.
And I think you've hit the nail on the head earlier when you talk about acting techniques, that as an audience, the audience are in Mulder's head, not yours.
Yeah.
So it's the point of view of Mulder being the one that's like, oh, don't have a go at my Mulder and Scully. What are you doing? Is that attitude of that? And that to me means that the drama is working, because it works perfectly in that regard, because you are so invested in 4 years of two characters, and you know, you're being introduced to this new character who we're aware of from back in season 1, but we see in season 4. Just on some of the acting techniques then, in regards to yourself in general, what do you find harder to do? Say something that's like unreserved, a bit more subtle, something that's held back, or more emotional, high stakes. Which do you feel is the hardest one to portray?
It's quite easy for me to these subtle little scenes and the twists and turns and stuff. I mean, I made a career out of playing these kinds of, you know, complicated, subtle characters, many of them not very good people. I'm not been in very many scenes where it's like two guys yelling at each other in their face, like, or, but I guess I did do some military shows along the way, but, that's an interesting question. I hadn't really thought of it that way. A lot of the things I get are just straight up power roles, power between two men fighting over who is the strongest.
Right.
This is a scene that plays out in every TV show, every movie, every week. And how do men truly negotiate power? And it's been a lifelong interest for me to observe how truly powerful people negotiate that power.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think it would be amiss of me. One of the showrunners on the show is a real big Bosch fan as well.
Oh.
So the Titus Weaver stuff that you did in the first season, playing Sam, who was himself an obnoxious character.
He was the worst.
Yeah, I mean, coming from something like that, which is that is dark and depressing and things. To be able to like sort of distance yourself, come out of your own head from those type of characters, how do you do that in your own mind? Do you literally, as you say, just train yourself to get out of your head from playing that? Because I think it was 4 episodes that you were in for that particular run, wasn't it?
That character in particular, if you're going to play somebody who is sick, really, alcoholic and a sexual predator. In order to play someone like that, it has to cost you something, in the end. And in the journey of playing that person, from an athletic standpoint I'm getting to work with Titus, who might know and whom I respect, and he's tremendous in it. And from an athletic perspective, it was very satisfying. On an emotional level, however, to expose the darkest bits of yourself like that is very costly. And there's a lot of grief in that part. I've played many, sort of sexual predators and stuff like that over time, and killers and rapists and stuff. And obviously I'm not that. But there is, in each of us, a part sometimes harbors dark thoughts, fantasies. Sometimes somebody cuts you off in traffic and you just want to kill them, but even deeper than that, right? And so to live in that for an extended period of time can make you feel pretty sick at the end of the day. And it took me a few weeks after getting out of that part to sort of feel like, okay, I'm clean, I'm well, because I felt pestilential and disgusting for a good number of weeks there.
In regards to, because I would be killed because she's in love with Titus. How was he to play with and obviously to be in company with him?
Oh shit, I love the guy. Yeah, he's great. He's great. I mean, he wrote the forward to my book even. I had done a movie with him some years ago. It was like a student film or something. I don't know how we both ended up in it. But I met him and we went out to the desert and we, shot guns at each other for a week or something. And so I had a relationship with him. And then, Titus is, he's a star now.
Yeah.
But he was essentially a working actor until he was in his late 50s, I mean, he was just bumping along doing guest spots and little parts in movies and stuff. And, and he really honed his craft over the years. And he's just more of the nicest guys. And he's unusual, but he's not, there's no artifice to him. Right.
Yeah.
And he really likes to act. And so, show up on the day of doing something like that with somebody who really is good at what they do and really likes to do it. It's such a joy, man. So yeah, no. And, is your friend blonde? Because he really likes blondes.
She's a brunette, but
we might make an exception.
She'll love that. Sarah will love that. So moving back just jumping back to the X-Files then. For Bill Scully's character, he kind of does change a little bit. We get this Christmas Carol family orientated thing with your wife is pregnant and things like that, which will interplay with the likes of Emily for the show. What did you make overall to Bill Scully's character as we get through Christmas Carol and into Emily and then the final shots that we see of him, because we won't see him again, and we'll hear from him on the phone, but in the later seasons. But we won't see him again after this, after that little arc.
During the filming of that season, my father was dying.
Yeah.
And so I was flying back and forth I would fly and we shot a couple of episodes in a row or something, seems to me, or over a period of 6 weeks, we shot 2 or 3 episodes or something.
Yeah.
And I would fly back, to Florida and help my father die, and then show up back in Vancouver. And so I was kind of out of it a lot of the time. I don't remember a lot of it. I remember, the day that my father died was the day that we shot Emily's funeral.
Yeah.
And that was a very, very strange and difficult day. I really liked Carrie Turner, who played my wife.
Yeah.
What was my wife's name? What was the character's name?
Tara, it was.
Tara, right. Tara. Right. I was going to say Tia, but I know that wasn't it. But she was there's something very genuine and sweet about her. We get into those scenes, it made me see Bill Scully kind of in a slightly different way.
Right.
Place where, in his world, right?
Yeah.
Where in the world where Bill Scully has more control and is loved, and their life is full of possibilities as we're having a child, and it did expose a new side to that character. I remember though, I don't know if I should tell this story, but that's at the very end of the thing where it's Christmas Carol, I guess.
Yeah.
And we're in my living room or whatever, and the door rings and somebody hands her an envelope and she says that, I am the mother or something, right?
Yeah. I'm Emily's mother. Yeah.
Oh my God. It came up. It was like such a soap opera moment that as soon as they said cut, I just started laughing.
Right.
Oh my God. Oh my God. I don't think Julia thought it was very fun, but
well, it is quite melodramatic. I mean, it's
so melodramatic, man.
It is that the whole episode is a bit, and it's and I'll be honest, it's not one of my favorite episodes. That's not fair. I appreciate the art. I appreciate the X-Files as a whole.
Yeah, but it totally jumped the shark, don't you think?
I wouldn't say necessarily jump the shark. There's a lot of other things that makes X-Files jump the shark, but it did become a bit of a soap opera, and it isn't particularly my favorite. Episodes or mythology episodes of the piece. But having said that, it is quite nice to hear that there's at least some recognition of that in your part, because it does sometimes. I'm not necessarily that scene, but sometimes it does.
No, that scene particularly. Yeah.
Oh, amazing. Well, So I think the only other thing that I wanted to speak to you about as well is the if you're talking about the way you were then to the way you are now. If you were to give him Bill Scully's part again, as in, you didn't know anything about the previous iteration of Bill Scully and that didn't happen, would you approach it in a different way, or do you think you would still go with the way that you actually went, knowing what you know now?
There's no way of knowing that, really. I mean, I am me, right?
Yeah.
I am. I mean, yes, I have more experiences than I had, 30 years ago. And I am, if Bill Scully, were to appear, and if they did some more episodes and he were to appear, Bill Scully would be changed by his experiences. That much I do know. And he would be, a very high up officer or retired, the officer. And 30 years of doing that changes a person.
Yeah.
But I can't look back on. I have a certain amount of potential when you're a young actor, and that's as good as you are then. and try to fulfill that and do your best to fulfill that potential that on the days where you shoot things. With work and experience, your potential increases over time. One hopes. There are people who are very good and they're young and they can't act anymore. You see that as well. People who stop working on their crafts. It happens. But I don't have any idea what it would be like to go into the part not knowing.
Oh, interesting. One final thing with personal thing for me is that Aaron Sorkin, you've worked for in The West Wing.
Yeah.
Aaron Sorkin has a very particular. I mean, Chris Carter does as well, but the writings that you got for Chris Carter is fairly straightforward. With Aaron Sorkin, he writes in a particular style. How difficult was that using the techniques that you use for as an actor to jump onto that kind of ship to be able to deliver those lines?
Well, I think that's exactly right. I always refer to it as, in any show, when you're come in as a guest star, right? The train is moving, and they're all the stars. They're on the train, and the cast and the crew and the directors and the writers are all on the train, and you're like, you just try to leap on and not splat onto the side.
Yeah,
and that's true of any project. But most of them, you hope that somebody will be standing there like David Duchovny was and hold his hand out and pull you up.
Yeah,
or right, or the directors on X-Files were all very, very kind to me and helpful. But Sorkin's show was really difficult, man. And I had fun. I just knew that I had to be really, really prepared. And I had watched the show quite a lot. And the thing is, I had worked with the guy who was directing it before a couple of times.
Right.
And so the guy liked me. I mean, he basically just gave me the part. And so, that helped a lot. But yes, I said, I think this is very difficult coming onto this show. And they would go, oh, you should see some people just totally blow it. They just can't do it, And I said, well, what is that like when they do that? So they just point the camera at us the whole time.
Right. Yeah. I can't imagine what the words per minute is on a Sorkin show, but it's fast, isn't it? So,
and I'm Southern. I'm not a very fast talker, right? But you got to just, that's the deal,
Yeah.
And in order to do that, it's a technical thing. You have to know the words really, really well. That was a great learning experience for me. I got to work with Richard Schiff and Brad Whitford and Martin Sheen, heavyweights, man.
Yeah.
That was a great experience. I enjoyed that very much.
That's good. Well, one final piece. I don't know if you know this. I only found this, and it goes back to the X-Files. I only found this recently, as in like today. Apparently, there's a YouTube video, and it's a YouTube video of Bill Scully and Tara Scully, and it's set to music. So a lot of people do this nowadays, where they mix and match stuff together. And it's roles that you've played, say military roles that you've played, and roles that Carrie's played as well, stitched together to make it look like the story of Bill and Tara.
Oh my God!
So I would suggest looking for that. It was produced about 12 years ago, but you can find it on. Can you
send the link, maybe? I
can send you the link through. Yeah, I've got your email address on there. I can forward that to you. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's certainly.
Yeah, that's so strange.
Yeah,
that's wild.
It's amazing what the fans will do. From those type of characters, that. Even like certain one-shot characters who may only appear for 1 or 2 episodes.
Yeah.
But yeah, someone's taken the time to do a kind of a love letter to you and Tara. So it's
amazing. That's wonderful.
Yeah, fantastic.
The X-Files has the fans are wonderful for the most part, and I've gotten to meet quite a number of.
Have you been to any of the cons or anything like that at all?
No one's ever invited me. I would go, but no. But I mean, I'm on Facebook, and so people find me.
Yeah,
I used to be on Twitter, but there's some like weird people who came out of the woodwork, and so I retreated.
Yeah, well, you're not alone on that. There's a lot of people that do that. Speaking of things like that, so we usually at this point in the show, as we tend to wrap up, ask if you're doing any projects, anything like that. Now, obviously, Oppenheimer is probably the biggest project that you're doing. Is there anything else that you are currently doing, or anything that you want to promote, anything like that at all?
Not really. I mean, I've been doing a little part on this Perry Mason show, but it was little. I'm really interested to see how this movie Babylon comes out. It's got Margot Robbie and Gene Smart, and it's a cast of thousands. And dude, I'm telling you, the script is off the charts, wild.
Right. Okay.
It is crazy. So, I mean, when you see it, you won't believe it. The opening scene, I read the script. I was like, no way, they're not going to shoot that. And I was, wild, absolutely wild. So I'm excited to see both those movies.
Yeah.
In the meantime, I'm waiting around hoping someone's going to hire me. And then I teach, I coach all the time. So
yeah,
which I relate. It's the kind of the thing at this age in my life, I kind of live for. So
how do people find you and coaching wise? Is that something that you do local to the area and things like that? Yeah. Or do people approach you and things? How does that work?
Yeah, it's just local, and I don't really advertise. It's kind of word of mouth.
Yeah.
I rent a little theater, and people, there's a couple of nights a week, and it's great. It's great stuff. To just work on acting and all with young people who are very motivated and talented. It's a privilege to get their trust and to do, to help them.
Well, brilliant. Well, thank you very much for joining me, Pat. It's been much appreciated, and thank you for your insights on the acting side of things. It's been a pleasure to speak to you. I'm sure that if the worlds align right, and that we've had plenty of people. I actually went to Chicago just before lockdown for the X-Fest festival, which we had loads of actors from the show, and it was an X-Files only show, and it was a wonderful atmosphere. And you're talking about the fans, coming from the UK. There's two of us that came over from the UK and spoke to some of the people who have been on the show a couple of times, and the atmosphere was incredible. So I hope that you do get the opportunity to visit and to do something like that.
That would be fun.
So, but thank you for joining me. And for everyone else, thank you all for listening. It's been a pleasure to speak to Pat. And until next time, remember, as always, trust no one.
Are you a fan of the Marvel Universe?
Can you tell your Kang from your Doctor Doom?
Well, if so, boy, do we have a podcast for you.
Podcast 616 is the We Made This Network's long-running Marvel podcast, and it's under new management.
We're your hosts, Ashley Thomas
and Hugh McStay.
And together, we are going to lead you every step of the way through the Marvel Cinematic Universe's upcoming multiverse saga.
Everything from She-Hulk to Avengers Secret Wars will be covered on the podcast in the kind of detail that would make a Wikipedia article blush.
We're going to have some detours into the wider Marvel world where we'll look at non-MCU projects dating all the way back to Marvel's origins in the groovy, funky 60s, and all the way up to the birth of the greatest franchise in cinema history.
And we'll be joined on our adventure by a roll call of guests so impressively knowledgeable that they'll make the Avengers themselves look clueless by comparison.
So if you like your opinions sharper than Wolverine's claws,
or takes hotter than the Human Torch's underpants,
then get Podcast 616 in your ears as a matter of urgency.
You'll love it 3000. Podcast 616. Disassemble.
The Xcast and X-Files podcast was created by Tony Black and is produced and hosted by Carl Sweeney, Sarah Blair and Kurt North.
You can find the podcast on Twitter at the X_cast, on Facebook by typing in the Xcast, and in our group, X-Files Basement, the Xcast podcast fan group, and on Instagram at the Xcast pod.
Don't forget, you can support the show by becoming a member on Patreon. Our patrons get early access to episodes, behind-the-scenes chats with our hosts and a thriving community of X-Files, and other premium interviews and specials. To find out more and subscribe, you can go to patreon.com/thexcast. That's patreon.com/thexcast.
We are also part of the We Made This podcast network, full of popular culture shows, including our Millennium series, The Time Is Now. You can find all of our shows at our website, wemadethispod.com, or via Twitter at wemadethispod.
Thanks for listening and keep watching the skies.